Now, during the height of the pandemic, a rapper named CJ popped out of nowhere. At one point, it felt like his name was being pushed everywhere, and it was all thanks to one song that eventually ended up touching the Billboard Top 10. Overnight, CJ had appeared in everyone's algorithm, and that later led to a record deal, a bunch of cosigns, and a rise that most artists spend their whole careers chasing. However, it was only a short time after that things started to unravel, because CJ wasn't just another rapper blowing up, he was being pushed as a gangster rapper. The only thing was, although the image had everything it needed to convince you, the look, the sound, the energy, there was something off that people couldn't quite put their finger on. And the more people looked into it, the less it started to make sense. During the rise of his success, CJ was a 24-year-old out of Staten Island, New York, of Puerto Rican descent, who suddenly found himself at the center of one of the most viral rap songs of 2020. Whoopty didn't just go viral, it exploded. The song took over the internet, climbed the charts, and eventually peaked at number 10 on the Billboard Hot 100. And with that kind of momentum, everything moved fast. CJ quickly landed a deal with Warner Records, one of the biggest labels in the music industry. The cosigns started coming in. The industry support looked like it was there, and on the surface, it looked like everything was lining up perfectly. But as people started paying closer attention, some things didn't quite add up, and the image he was building in the music didn't seem all that authentic or real. Everything from the lyrics to the image, even the colors, pointed in one direction. It all screamed gang member. Was CJ actually a gang member though? That was the question, right? Now, CJ had admitted very early on during his rise that he wasn't originally a drill rapper. He just decided to make a drill song one day, a subgenre in hip-hop that heavily leans into street culture. And that's exactly the energy he tapped into with his biggest record, Whoopty. That's a very common way to introduce a new street rapper. Come out the gate, super aggressive, and emulate the lifestyle, make people assume before they ever think to question. And for CJ, it worked, at least in the beginning. CJ self-released Whoopty in the summer of 2020, and it ended up climbing very fast. So much to the point where he got a record deal just from the popularity of that song alone. That's when the cosigns started coming in. Several hip-hop artists were seen embracing him, and at one point he was even seen in the club dapping up Drake, although it looks like Drake didn't want to dap him up. What do you think? That's the kind of momentum that signals to the entire industry that this person matters. Pay attention. But things were about to change very fast. To really understand what was going on, you have to look at the timing of when CJ became popular. A few things were happening around that period that are very important to talk about, and the biggest one was the rise of the New York drill scene, with rapper Pop Smoke becoming the face of that entire wave. He had captured the attention of the industry, of the world, of fans, of the culture, and it felt like he was just getting started, like the ceiling hadn't even been touched yet. But Pop Smoke never got the chance to see where it was all going. Bashar Jackson, professionally known as Pop Smoke, was only 20 years old. He had the momentum, he had the world's attention, he had the look, and just like that, it was all over. On February 19th, 2020, Pop Smoke was staying at an Airbnb in the Hollywood Hills when a home invasion turned deadly. And just like that, the voice of that whole movement was gone.
Pop Smoke was known by some of the biggest names in the business. His murder has stunned fans everywhere.
The drill scene had just lost the face of its movement, and naturally that created a gap. Not that Pop Smoke could ever be replaced, because you can't replace the smoke, but that's just how the industry works. When a space opens up, people start stepping in to try to fill that space. And at the same time, another major figure, 6ix9ine, who was also of Puerto Rican descent, was dealing with legal issues and was on home confinement. So he wasn't fully active either. So now you had this moment where the lane felt completely wide open. The audience was still there, the demand was still there, but there weren't a lot of people at the front of it. And in the music industry, that kind of vacuum doesn't stay empty for long. This is where CJ comes in, because part of his rise was timing. The spot was open for the taking, and someone was gonna try to take it. There were other rappers coming up around that time, but CJ managed to stand out, and a big part of why that was because of how he looked. CJ had this very racially ambiguous appearance that made people question where he was from, what his background really was. Bro just had this very versatile look. I mean, look at this guy, right? You're like, where the fuck this nigga from, right? Like, is he black, Latino, or what? There was this natural curiosity around him that other artists in that space just didn't have. Most artists in this space are either black, Dominican, Puerto Rican, and they actually looked like the part, right? CJ was just floating somewhere in the middle.
They said I'm mixed. I'm black, white, I'm Mexican, Arab.
Even though his origins were known, the average person discovering him didn't fully understand it, and that added to the intrigue. It made him feel like a mystery at first glance. And in that initial moment of discovery, mystery works in your favor. People fill in the blanks themselves, and there's power in letting assumptions fuel conversations about you in private. So when you put things together, the gap in the scene, the timing, the image, CJ didn't just blow up randomly. He stepped into a movement that was already waiting to be filled. The first real point of contention for CJ was the term itself, Whoopty. Because what did it actually mean? Like, whoopty, whoopty, whoopty. The term originates from the Bloodhound Brims, a gang out of New York, and it's used as a way for members to greet each other and show respect. Whoopty, my nigga. So it has meaning, it has history behind it. But when CJ was asked about it by rapper Fat Joe, a veteran in a rap game, someone who actually understands where these things come from, his response was a little evasive.
What does whoopty mean, man?
It's a worldwide thing now. I got kids. I got kids saying it. You know what I'm saying? I got older folks saying it. So it's a worldwide thing now. I made it a worldwide thing.
Yeah, but is it a word like you used to say with your homies and all that?
Exactly. Like
and then you say, I'm throwing whoopty in the song and make that shit.
That's it. It's worldwide now.
He didn't really explain what it meant or where it came from, and instead, it almost sounded like he was taking credit for it, like it was just something he created. And that's where things started to take a turn, because that didn't sit well with people who were actually connected to that. Latique LeBrim Johnson, a leader of the Bloodhound Brims, who was serving a 30-year sentence at the time, and I believe still is actually, ended up speaking out from prison and checking CJ on it.
So I'm going to take a moment to set the record straight for you. I see there's a lot of controversy over this Whoopty thing. The content that he used is not his content. So his foundation is based off a lie.
So this man is behind bars doing decades, and he's watching someone build a career off of a term tied to everything he and the people around him gave up their freedom for, which I don't know why they would do that. From his perspective, CJ was profiting off something he had no real ties to, something that people were doing serious time for. And that sentiment was echoed by others as well. China Mac, a rapper and former gang member with connections to LeBrim, also called CJ out, basically accusing him of taking something that wasn't his.
This kid, CJ, basically didn't have no ties to them or whatever, and just basically just jacked their whole shit.
So now what you're looking at is a situation where CJ is using a term, building a hit record around it, and making millions off it, while the people it actually comes from are saying, it has nothing to do with them. Whatever he's doing, it ain't their shit. They're essentially saying, bro, just be yourself, because you ain't us and you're damn sure not a part of this gang. And that's where the comparisons to 6ix9ine started coming in. Because with 6ix9ine, whether you agree with his choices or not, he was actually in the mix. He was around gang members. And those real ties are what eventually led to his legal situation. There were consequences. There was proof of involvement. But with CJ, according to what was being said, there was no real ties, which made it look less authentic and more like a strategy. I don't believe in glorifying that lifestyle, but if you're gonna say that's what you're about, at least be real about it. I may think it's dysfunctional. I may think it causes real damage, but if that's generally who you are, at least own it. Don't try to perform it. Now, once that narrative started to stick, everything around him began to get questioned, because now it wasn't just about the song anymore. It was about credibility. The image he was building started to feel less like something real and more like something constructed. And in hip-hop, that's a dangerous line to walk. When you're out here convincing the world you're something you're not, the wrong people start believing it as well. And those people don't settle things in the comments. They pull up with guns and shit. You can borrow a sound, you can borrow an aesthetic, but when people feel like you're borrowing a lifestyle, one that real people are actually dying behind, which that's kind of stupid, but that's when the pushback actually gets serious. And in CJ's case, the pushback came early. At the same time, there was another problem. Whoopty had become bigger than him. The song was everywhere, but outside of that record, there wasn't much that people were interested in. No strong identity, no clear personality, nothing that separated him from the moment he had just created. And that's where artists usually build something real or start to fade. A hit song can open the door, but it can't hold the door open for you. Just like a gym membership, it gets you in the building, but it ain't gonna lift those weights for you. And I know some of y'all know exactly what the fuck I'm talking about. You've been skipping the gym, just admit it. And for CJ, the momentum never really turned into anything deeper. The initial wave was strong, the attention was there, but over time it slowed down, the conversation shifted, the excitement faded, and the same energy that once propelled him to the top wasn't there anymore. And then there was another piece of the puzzle that started to make things make even more sense. Because although it felt like CJ came out of nowhere, just like how it felt like Ice Spice came out of nowhere, but it turns out that her producer Riot was already connected at the highest levels because his dad had been working at one of the biggest hip-hop radio stations in New York since the 90s. The so-called overnight success story usually has a little nepotism tucked in the back that nobody talks about. And for CJ, it was no different. Because behind the scenes, there was already a foundation in place for him. CJ had an uncle named James Cruz, who was the person behind helping him get a start in music. And James wasn't some, random guy who was loosely connected to the industry. He had actually been deeply involved in it for years, for decades actually. We're talking about someone who spent nearly 2 decades working alongside Sean Diddy Combs. James was actually the president of Bad Boy Records at one point, Diddy's record label. And before that, he had already been involved in marketing and promotions at a very high level, helping push the careers of artists like Busta Rhymes, Missy Elliott, and 50 Cent. So this wasn't just industry experience. This was someone who understood how to build a narrative around an artist, how to get the right people talking, how to position someone so the industry pays attention before the public even catches on. So when CJ started to rise, it wasn't happening in isolation. He had been around that environment early on, absorbing it, learning how it all worked from someone who had already done it at a very high level. And once Whoopty started gaining traction, everything moved exactly how you'd expect it to when the right people are involved. Because it's one thing to get a hit record, but it's another thing to get a hit record and on top of that have the right people around you. One of them leads to an actual shot, the other one most times just leads to another fluke. Now thanks to his uncle, who was also his manager, the deals came in quickly for CJ. First a record deal with Warner Records happened, then the publishing deal with Warner Chappell. The song kept climbing, the streams kept growing, and the industry fully got behind him. On paper, it looked like the perfect setup, the kind of situation most artists spend years trying to reach, but at the same time, it also made his rise feel different, because now it didn't look like just this random viral moment anymore. It looked like something that had structure behind it, something that was being guided towards success. And when people started piecing that together, it just added another layer on top of everything else that was already being questioned. The street credibility, the Whoopty term controversy, and now this. It all started painting the same picture. And that's where the conversation shifts. Because having access, having connections, having the machine behind you, that can get you in the door, but it can't make people stay. Because in hip-hop, more than any other genre in the world, people are listening for something beyond the music. They're listening for who you are, the story, the background, the sense that the person behind the music actually has lived something. And with CJ, that part never really felt convincing, because he was trying to lean on something that was not real for him. You get what I'm saying? And once that conversation shifted from the song to the person behind it, everything started looking a little different. The lyrics, the image, the way he carried himself, it all started to fall apart a little. Not because the music changed, but because the perception of him changed. Or should I say, the cracks started to show. Obviously, once people feel like something isn't real, the doubt that sits in the background just becomes louder and louder. And over time, it slowly disconnects the audience from the artist, quietly, almost invisibly. And in CJ's case, that disconnect happened pretty fast, right? And that's when the timing can become a double-edged sword, because the same thing that helped him rise is also what made it harder for him to maintain that type of success. He stepped into an open lane, but when that moment passed, there wasn't enough underneath it to carry him forward. And that's usually what separates a viral artist from a lasting one. After Whoopty, CJ kept dropping music, but nothing really stuck. And honestly, how could it? When your very first moment out the gate is a Billboard Top 10 record that takes over the entire internet, you've already set the bar at a high level that's almost impossible to clear again. Everything that comes after that lives in Whoopty's shadow. It's a blessing and a curse. The song put him on, and in a way, the song also boxed him in. It's happened to plenty of artists. Panda is a good example with Designer. Now when you look at CJ's run, it all starts to make sense. It wasn't just that he blew up fast. It's that everything around him was built for that one moment. The timing, the image, the machine behind him. All of it was designed to get him there. But at the end of the day, if we're being honest, the fake gang member thing just didn't really help, right? You can have the best team in the world behind you, the right look, the right song, but if people don't believe you, none of it matters, right? Anyway, if you made it this far, drop a like on this video. And if you're new here, my name is Blacky Speaks. Nice to meet you. Y'all remember CJ, by the way? Because I feel like you probably have something to say about this entire conversation. So y'all let me know in the comment section below, and I'll catch you guys on the next video. Peace, I'm out.